The king of Strongcliff was feared by all the maidens in the town. He would spend all his days sending guards to look for the most beautiful maidens in the town. He will then spend the night surrounded by women in all shapes and forms and drink till he doesn't have the strength to even walk with his 2 legs. No maiden in the town went past him without him having a feel of their youthful beauty. One morning after looking through his window, he recognized a soothing voice carried across the village and singing to the tune of the most beautiful melodies he had ever heard from any maiden. As he inquired about who it was, the figure quickly marched into the nearby room, locking herself and preventing any further questions from the king. The king loved a game of a woman playing hard and went to his chambers, opening up his most valuable treasures and bringing out the most beautiful and expensive necklace to be given to the door of the figure that was singing the sweet melodies. It appeared to be the voice of an old woman in her 90s who was living with her sister in a single one-room apartment. Around evening, whilst they were helping each other to get dressed for bed, they heard a knock at the door. It appeared to be the king, who had left his chambers to visit the voice he had heard from that particular location. He demanded that the door be opened so he could see the face of the young maiden. The older woman, having had affection from a man for a very long time, thought of how wonderful it would feel to experience youth again, and this time with none other than a royal, the king of her town. She disguised her voice as that of an old maiden and deceived the king into coming back next time, claiming she would give him a part of her that the king will never forget. Her finger when he comes back the next week. The king complied and decided to come back the next week. The old woman stuck her finger in a smelly gum and wrapped it till the next week with hopes that it might become younger again. But to her utmost shock, the finger had wrinkled beyond recognition and she began to cry. At the same time, the king arrived at the gates, hoping to see the youthful finger of the lady behind the beautiful voice. With no other choice, she represented her sister's finger, which for other reasons had not wrinkled like hers because she was younger. The king caressed the finger, licking and smelling it. At this point he had endured too much from a young woman living in a lonely pig stain. He was breathless and demanded to see the face behind the youthful voice. Something he could have freely taken, but for the first time in his life had patience to follow a lady's orders. The old lady then demanded for one last thing. That she be welcomed to the king's bed at night in total darkness and with no candles. She claimed she was shy. The next morning, she forced her sister to glue her saggy skin so she could appear youthful before the king under the cloak at night. She waddled her way within the palace halls and finally into the king's chambers, where she gave herself to the young king. Her sister was restless at night. What if she gets caught in the palace and thrown into the dungeons? She only said a silent prayer and went back to bed. The king was certain he had a good time with the lady he had so long wished for. He quietly snuck into the hallway and brought a candle to see the face of the beautiful maiden. To his dismay, it was an old haggard crone. Baffled and disgusted, he called his guards to throw her out into the forest where the wild animals would eat her already dead flesh upon falling. However, luck was on her side and she got tangled within the tree branches, dangling back and forth. An old witch passing through the forest saw her and attempted to rescue her. As she lay down crying, the old witch breastfed her and she fell into a deep sleep. In that process, her wrinkled skin began to tighten again, revealing a youthful skin never found in the kingdom. She had turned into a young woman within a twinkle of an eye. That very morning, the king and his guards were out on his usual hobby of hunting. When he saw a wild pig, he fired his gun, but the animal only ran to the location of the now youthful woman. The king was astonished by this beauty, not recognizing that it was the old woman he had asked to be thrown down the cliff. He just couldn't stop admiring her beauty and sent her back to the palace. The young sister never saw her sister again for days. She didn't know what happened until one day, a guard arrived at her door holding an ornamental garment, inviting her to the wedding of the king. As the old woman sat in one corner, she was suddenly approached by the young queen, who claimed she was Dora, her older sister. She had transformed and was amazed by how beautiful she had become. She gorged on the foods and decided to never leave because she was the queen's sister. She made her way into the king's bedroom and decided to never leave. She wanted to find out how her sister was young again. She hid her in her wardrobe when she saw the king approaching. Around midnight, whilst the new couples were being intimate, the sister came out from the wardrobe and scared the king. She was thrown out. She sat at the village square and asked passers-by to flay her skin so she can also become young like her sister. Some ignored until a greedy old knife sharpener agreed after she gave him all her gold and jewels. He took her deep into the forest and flayed her skin. She came back looking bloodied and with only her muscles laying bare. The older sister, during the coronation of a new queen in a distant land, started seeing her skin turning back to wrinkles. The effect was not permanent but temporary. She ran away from the king's sight and away from the public, where no one could see her gruesome transformation.